would like to apologize. We're having some technical difficulties. He will be with us in just 1 second.
All right, sorry for being fashionably late here. I'd like to welcome all of you to the next session, a session on simulation environments here on Earth. And I wanted to introduce this session by way of the following story. My name is Oded Aronson, and I had the privilege of being involved in several space projects, both NASA and ESA. LRO, MRO, Cassini, and my favorites are, of course, the Mars rovers. And I want to tell you a story about the rovers, which I think will really serve to introduce this session. And the story happened during the field tests that we ran before the rovers landed on Mars. When I say the rovers, I mean Spirit and Opportunity. Of course, Curiosity followed. And the heroes of these stories are Steve Squires, who was my advisor, and Andy Knoll, who's a professor at Harvard, a planetary geologist and paleontologist and an intellect. And they were walking around in the Mojave Desert. There's a place called Mars Hill where many of the tests were being conducted, training the rovers and the science team on how to interact with a platform that's supposed to measure remotely things about Mars and perform scientific experiments. And what happened was Andy kind of saw an interesting rock over maybe 20 meters away, walked over to it, kicked it over, picked it up, took out a hand lens and inspected it, and then put it back down on the ground. And then Squires, who was the PI of Spirit and Opportunity, told him, now you see what you just did? That's going to take the rovers a week. Okay, and I think that has an important lesson in it. And you know, years later, of course, we did all these things that Andy just did, but we did them on Mars and we did them robotically and remotely. But the lesson was that, you know, robotic exploration and in situ explorations is really, it's a very cost-effective and productive way to explore other planets, Moon, Mars, and beyond. But the human element is certain, I think, to come back and play a significant role, not just in, as the title of the session suggests, in inspiration and education of future generations of space scientists, but also in doing science, which is what I like to do. So to prepare for that, I think we're going to hear from a collection of bright-eyed young scientists and engineers who are helping us plan for how we're going to actually do these exploration of other planets. And what I've been asked to do is to introduce all of them now and then just let them have the stage rather than introduce them one by one. We're going to hear from Itai from the Davidson Institute, the educational arm of the Weizmann Institute of Science, my own home institution now. And he's going to talk about space in the news. Roy Naor is also from the Weizmann Institute, as well as from the Davidson Institute, who's going to talk about simulative environments for space missions. He's actually already participated in one, and he's about to participate in another one. I'm sure he'll tell us. Alon Shikar, who's the architect for a habitat that's about to be deployed in the desert in less than 2 weeks. Dr. Hillel Rubenstein, who's running this project that you'll hear about called DMARS in the Negev Desert. And finally, Hadass Nevenzal of the Davidson Institute and the Weizmann Institute. So without further ado, and again, sorry for the delay, please welcome Itai.
Hello. I would like to express my appreciation to the select but few sole survivors of this long day. My name is Itai, as Oded said. I'm the editor of the Davidson science website, which is the biggest and most popular science website in Hebrew. And you're more than invited to drop by and download our free app. And what I'm going to talk about is a very brief review of the relationship between space and the general news media. Does anyone recognize this nice place? Okay, not all together. This is the landscape as perceived by an artist of the Proxima Centauri B planet. It was discovered in August 2016. And its discovery was very exciting because it's an Earth-like planet. It is very close to our solar system, just about 4 light years away. And this discovery and this proximity made top headlines all over the world and in Israel too. Just a few months later, another very exciting planetary discovery, this time the TRAPPIST-1 system, which has 7 Earth-like planets, also very close, just under 40 light years away from here. And these two made huge top headlines all over the world. And just last October, another very exciting top news discovery, the Newton-star merger, discovered by LIGO and Virgo detectors, and also conquering the top of the news all over the world. So we have, in just under 2 years, 3 space discoveries getting to the top of the news all over the world. And what's common between all those discoveries is that they are very interesting, very exciting, but also they have absolutely no influence on the daily life of people on this planet Earth. I mean, those planets and planet systems are very far away, too far to visit or communicate with them in any way. And of course, the Newton-star merger is very exciting for astrophysicists, but it doesn't influence the lives of the daily Earthling. On the contrary, look at this interesting news item. The American Cancer Society just published this data a few weeks ago. It describes the reduction in mortality from cancer by 2% last year and by over 25% in the last 2 decades. And surprisingly, although this is very relevant to everyone here on Earth, I believe everyone sitting here knows someone who had cancer or has cancer. It was covered by the news. This is the item in the New York Times, but far less than the news, space news items we just saw, which are far less relevant to most people. So the question is, does the general news media have a bias towards covering space? And let's see some research about it. This is a research about data, space coverage from 10 quality newspapers in Western Europe. And these papers published 244 space items in just 62 days. That's 1 to 2% of all items they published during this period. And it's also probably the same trend in America. Research checking out the space publications in the New York Times found 772 space items in just 1 year. That's more than 2 items a day on average. And going east, the same trend in India. These 2 dailies in English, they have 14% of all the science items are about space. And one of them even covered space more than science and more than medicine and health, which is quite impressive. And what's going on here in Israel? A work by Yael Barel from the Technion, and she found out that space items were about 13% of all science items in the general media news, which is also very impressive. That's 82% of the items about physics. So how can, if there is such a bias, how can the space industry exploit it to promote their projects and ideas? The first tool of any communication with the public is the good old press release. You send out a PR announcement, and media research indicates that almost all PR announcements, almost all the science media news originate from public relation announcements. But sending out a PR announcement may not be enough. Journalists get them all the time from all kinds of science institutions. And there is a very fierce competition on the attention of journalists. You can see here just a glimpse in my Gmail box. All I get is PR items. Some of them are about space. And someone has to stand out in order to be picked by a journalist to cover. Another way to make your project stand out is creating a buzz, especially in the social networks. For example, here is a Facebook post by a writer working for the Israeli Space Agency, who wrote last April about the coming announcement about the discovery of water on planets, on moons of planets. And when more people who are journalists or even non-journalists see those posts and share them and spread them around, you get a buzz. It becomes the talk of the day. And even journalists who had no intention of covering this would now feel obliged to do so. And that's because journalists mainly follow the herd and rarely go on their own. How much buzz you can create would often depend on your financial resources. And this is a nice example. When you have a lot of money, you can have a major Hollywood movie being released at the same time of your research. This is the case of The Martian, the movie that was released in the fall of 2015, almost simultaneously with the research discovering the evidence for liquid water on Mars. And those two the publications really promoted each other. And if you want, again, to get more publicity for your idea and you don't have the budget of a Hollywood movie, you would have to be more innovative and creative. For example, involve the public, such as with a photo competition or other ways. Another important thing you can do is emphasize the educational value of your project. We also hear the HUPO project, the student satellite, the Space IL project, and of course the DMARS, which will be presented thoroughly by the next speakers. And they all emphasize educational value. There are economic values for space projects which can be emphasized. They discover new drugs, new materials, they create jobs. It's great. You can tell a good story. It doesn't have to be an astronaut story. People love personal stories, exciting, interesting, and they love them more if you use the magic word space. This is really the word that can make a buzz. We saw here that the media loves space, so relate space in any way to your project. That might help it get off the ground. Thank you. Roino!